Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I have a head cold.
Man, so do you know the technical, what's the difference in a head cold and I guess a chest cold? There's just no problems with your chest. Is that what that's
Well, the
saying?
difference between a head cold and a chest cold is one is in your head and one is in your chest.
I guess I've just never really distinguished my colds. I get a man cold, so I just want to die and lay down and die when I have
I
that
have
thing.
I haven't really communicated with my wife that I have a head cold because she would look at me and say,
Yeah, suck
get
it
over
up.
yourself." Yeah.
Yeah,
So
suck it up, Buttercup. Well, I'm certainly sorry. Hey, I do want to give a shout out if you're watching online, if you're watching on YouTube. I am in a borrowed space, brand new coffee shop in downtown Conway called Leveled Ground. My friend Paul DeHaan and his church own this space. They're using it to raise money for missions. It's become a real cool third space for the community. It's only been open for a short time. So if you're ever in Central Arkansas, you want to stop by Leveled Ground, tell Paul DeHaan that Josh said hi. You heard about it on EST. What
there
else
you
could they
go.
hear about on EST?
Well, something that we love talking about is church teams, our
Mm-hmm.
sponsor. So thank you, church teams, for sponsoring this program. They've got an offer for you at est.church. So you can go to est.church. I believe it's 2 months free, which is actually very generous, gives you an opportunity to try out all that they have to offer. And, this is a church management software company that really cares and genuinely wants what is best for the church. So, if you're looking to kind of bring all of your applications in one place, whether it be membership or text messaging, online giving, this is where church teams shines, particularly with churches of all sizes. So they've got a variety of applications and they have a scalable pricing system based upon the size of the church. So love what they have to offer, love all of their resources. So go to est.church to check out the offer. You can always go to churchteams.com as well. But if you want to, if you want to let them know that you're listening to the show and that's how you heard about this, that certainly helps us out too. So thank you, church
Yeah, that's a
teams.
good thing. Okay, so I've got a topic idea, Sam, that we could talk about. I'm a big believer in not only adding, but subtracting. I think ends sometimes are good. And a lot of times you need to kill off things. Kill off may sound like the most dramatic way to say it, but there are
Murder.
let's murder something. There are
We're
people,
gonna
there
murder some
are
church programs.
organizations, there are events, there's programs, there's even churches that have lived their life, and there is a time and a season for everything, time to be born and a time to die. So we're not going to name the names of any programs or events that need to go because we're not speaking like church. It's not like the Big C church. These aren't things that need to go. What we're talking about are how you might think through which programs and events need to go. And this is a great time at the beginning of the year is a really great time to start to consider this. I wouldn't do it immediately, which would be one of my main points is when are we going to do this? Here in the beginning of the year, maybe think through this stuff now so that you don't maybe start it back up in the fall. That's kind of my point here. Let's spend some time, a couple of months thinking through things and then make a dream, a plan, and execute it. Put a date on it, and that would be the fall. So, Sam, I got some questions for you that we could maybe talk about here. The first one is just how do you know? How do you know which programs and or events need to go?
That's a good question. One, just how many people are showing up? So if
Mm,
it's an event and you hope that 500 show up and five show up, well, either that event has seen its day or you have a marketing problem or a communication
right.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I would first say, at least ask yourself the question, do we have a communication problem? Do we have a marketing
Mm-hmm.
problem? If it's
Mm-hmm.
not doing what you want it to do, maybe you're not communicating the way that you should. So obviously not everything needs to die, but we are talking about those things that do need
Yeah.
to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, okay, so it's not a communication problem. It's not a marketing problem. um, the first thing is it's just like, are you not getting the attendance that you
Yeah.
want?
Yeah.
And maybe you've got it. Maybe that just that alone would dictate doing something differently.
Yeah, that could be a clear factor. I know that in a church I served at one time, we just could not, no matter what we tried to do, get people to come to this Sunday evening sort of gathering that we had. And it just, we tried to market it. We did everything we did for everything else we did. We mentioned it from the pulpit. We added food elements. We added, just all kinds of stuff. Changed the time a little bit. These sort of stuff. It just did not work. And eventually, my family of five was the vast majority of the people showing up. And so we killed it. And so that is a good factor to consider, is just the attendance that you have. And I think another one, it's sort of a spectrum. A way to balance this out is, one is, what is your mission? And so, if you're trying to accomplish things, there are some things that you accomplish best with smaller numbers. I'll give you an example. If you're starting a discipleship program, I'm a big believer in pouring into 5 to 10 to 12 people at first, that very first thing. So if you have 5 people and you're going to spend 6 months discipling these people, that's not a failure. That's actually probably a pretty good way to do it. So some things with the mission, you don't need a lot of people. The other thing is the bandwidth. So if you're trying to accomplish, reaching children, there's a bunch of ways to do that. One very effective way to do that is through Upward Sports. Another way to do that is through other Bible study curriculum or programs, Vacation Bible School. But just because it's an idea out there, you want to really kind of layer that out with, do we have the personnel? Do we have the time, the energy, and the personnel to do it? And so there are some churches that maybe Vacation Bible School is not the best approach for you to accomplish that thing, and you need to kill off the Vacation Bible School in preference to something else. You know what I mean? So it's more
Them,
like, don't
them's
stretch yourself too
fighting,
thin.
fighting words, man. Kill off
Well, it's
vacation.
January. I
Fight.
feel I feel like I won't get too much trouble since it's January and not June. If it was
Yeah.
June, I'd get in a lot of trouble.
Well, you bring up a good point. Um, the question is, what's the goal, right? So the goal is
Hmm.
never the program. The goal is never the program.
No.
You know,
Mm-mm. Or the
you
event.
brought
Right.
up Upward Sports. They're a sponsor of the show. I think that's a good example. I mean, they would tell you the goal is to get your people ministering
Hmm.
to the neighborhood.
Right.
They just happen to have a program that works. And by the way, they're tweaking and changing, and Upward's different now than it was when it got started. So they've
Right.
adapted. They themselves have changed. The program itself has changed with the times. Your church has to do the same thing. So it's always good to have the goal in mind. The goal is never to run a program. That's how the institution starts feeding on itself, when
Mm.
the programs and the activities of the institution become a means to an end in and of themselves. There's a lot of cliches in what I just said, but I'm gonna blame
Just
the
keep
head
rolling
coach.
with it. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So the church, the way the church, even an established church, a traditional church, a church that's been around a long time, the way the institution doesn't become institutionalized, and the way that you are still the organism or the organization that is the church, is not to make your programs a means to an end.
Hmm.
That they simply help you accomplish the goal, and that's often forgotten. Choir is another good example, man. I mean, and we have adult choir, we have student choir,
Hmm.
we have children's choir. We've had to change how we
Mm.
do them, though,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
if choir in and of itself is the goal, you're gonna fail. You're gonna
Yeah.
fail. Now, I say this as somebody. I have choirs in my church. I know that gets a lot of negativity, and oh, you've got choirs and all that. And I actually like
Yeah.
choirs.
We've got
I think they can accomplish a
big
lot of
choir.
good, but you
Hmm.
just can't make it about the choir. The second you make it about the choir, you failed. And I think
Right.
honestly, style was an issue with a lot of choirs because man, there's some dated music out there that's really bad.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I also think a lot of the problems with choirs was it became about the
Mm.
program instead of the
Yeah.
goal, which is training and equipping people in worship.
Yeah, yeah. I think, to put it very simply, and of course you can read like Rick Warren material, you can read all sorts of material about sort of the purposes of a church. But to put it simply, you want to invite outsiders in, and then you want to disciple the insiders. That's what you want to do. And even the inviting the outsider in is a part of discipleship, right? It's first steps there. So, how are you inviting people in and discipling the ones that you have? And one of the things that you can look at is if you sit down and you're just real honest as a pastor, as a minister, as a board, or as an elder group, and you sit down and you list out everything you do, sometimes you'll notice, man, we're doing 15 things on the invite outsiders in, and we've got this one struggling thing over here for the developing the insider, or reverse. Nearly everything we do is really because of us insiders and is not really inviting outsiders in. So you want to shift some of that. I always say balance it out a little bit. So, one or two per ministry outsiders, one or two per ministry insiders, and really put your eggs in those baskets. Think through them. Where do you have the buy-in? That sort of stuff. And so if it's not fulfilling the mission and it's pulling too many resources, it may be time to put it up for consideration of killing it.
Yeah, and I'll just say this: I love the rhythm of programs. So,
Mm-hmm.
the whole point of this episode is to talk about killing programs. I have started far more programs than I've killed at churches. In fact, children's choir was the most recent one that we started at West Bradenton. Let me tell you that last Sunday, at the time of this recording, it was last Sunday, and they absolutely crushed their
I
production. We
saw
did
some
it
pictures. Looked amazing. Mm-hmm.
Sunday morning, all three services at the English speaking 43rd Street campus. And man, it was just phenomenal. So I've actually started more than I've canceled. But we're talking about canceling or killing or murdering, whatever term you want to use, the
Yeah.
programs and the events.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to this when and how.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you really need to, let's start with the how. I'll start with the how. You really need to ask yourself the question, what is the collateral damage? So
Mm-hmm.
if I do away with this, if I push this issue, and maybe you don't have to push, maybe everyone just will agree with you, but let's assume there's going to be some static. You really need to ask yourself the question, all right, if we cancel this, what is the fallout? And if the fallout is we're going to lose 80% of the church budget, like 80% of people, people who are supporting 80% of the budget are going to leave,
Yeah.
you might want to rethink killing that program. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to sound too much like a pragmatist. I believe in pragmatic decisions. I don't believe in the William James philosophy of pragmatism. So for those Theo bros who may be listening, I do know my stuff, and I've read every word that William James has written, and I understand what pragmatism is. First, a truly American philosophy, by the way, and his stuff is pretty fascinating. That being said, I'm not a true philosophical pragmatist, but sometimes you have to be pragmatic with what you're doing. Don't
Yeah.
kill
I
a
mean,
program. Don't kill a program that's going to kill your church. Let me put it that way.
right. You need to be, harmless as doves and shrewd as serpents, and just be smart. So, what I always try to get people to think through is first try to teach leadership this idea of we only because I'm my big philosophy. You can ask Jackie about this, my wife. The underlying philosophical idea for Josh King is almost always stewardship. I'm always thinking about stewardship. There are so many resources, so much time. You have a goal, you have objectives, you want to present more talents than you were given when the master shows back up. That's the idea. And so there is stewardship to it. We need to count the cost before we build the tower.
Maybe
So
that's why we're a good team, because my underlying philosophy of life is monetization.
okay, yeah, and yeah, and that's why we do really good at this stuff.
That's a joke. Please, for those of you who are listening, like, what? No, that's a joke. It is. I do
So
run a business, so I do have to think about that.
you have to think about money. So I would just say that like one of the ways to think through it is first considering that. And so it's not an idea of, there have been programs in churches that I thought to myself, I don't believe in it. I don't think it's helping our mission, but it's not hurting anything. And these people here enjoy it and they're still serving in other ways. It's not draining the budget. And so I've seen so many people go to fighting over killing off something like that that's just really the juice ain't worth the squeeze. You lose more people, you make more enemies. Just let them do their thing. It's not hurting anything. So let them do their thing. But you have to very clearly communicate. And this is the part that a lot of people who are maybe not as, they don't want to have the hard conversations. You just say, look, I love that you love it. I want you to have it. I'm not going to be involved in it. Okay. I'm not going to go to it. I may show up once a year. Invite me. Make sure you invite me every year to your big thing. But other than that, I just want you to know that my priorities are going to be in this, bucket over here. I have found that a good 75% of people are okay with that. There are 25% that just aren't, but you're just going to have to deal with that. You're a leader. So I would say some things like that. The other side of things is sometimes there are programs or events that exist in churches that are only happening because the leadership is propping it up. I was on staff at a church one time where all of the staff and their spouses were required to volunteer multiple hours in this one event. And when you looked around, there were no other volunteers. It was just, and I say volunteers loosely because it was tied to our job. We were propping this thing up that nobody wanted to go to, nobody wanted to volunteer it, but it was the pastor's wife's vision. And so we had to do it. And so there's a lot of times where, as a leader, you could step back and go, I'm not killing it, but I'm just not going to feed it anymore. All right. And just let nature take its course on that situation.
Yeah, when you remove the oxygen, a lot of times things just die naturally. And I would
Right.
say for 90%, 9 out of 10 times that
Mm,
I have done away with an event or a program, that's what I did. It's just there was no press, there was no support, the budget's not there. I'm not talking about it as the lead pastor. It just kind of fades. Now, I still want to be honest with people and I don't want to be
hmm.
manipulative and I don't want to, be passive aggressive.
Right.
I'm more just aggressive than I am anything else, but there is wisdom in let's remove the oxygen here and see what happens.
Hmm.
And if it starts to fade quickly, well, there's your answer. And then you can have a conversation with, the team leader, whoever the gatekeeper is, and then you're more doing pastoral care. And
Yeah.
I've done that a few times. I won't say that it's
Mm.
often, but there are times when we just kind of stopped forcing it. Like the example that you gave, that's just a pastor forcing something in there.
Mm.
Um, and when you stop kind of forcing it, it kind of moves on naturally, and people just stop showing up to it. The person that was really passionate about it does need a little shepherding, typically.
Mhm.
So I would just say, remove the oxygen, let things die naturally, and then follow up with whoever was really involved. Just make sure that they are shepherded and cared for. They might be. I don't want to over dramatize this, but they might be grieving somewhat the loss of something that they
Right.
cared about.
Yeah, I have found that you've got two kinds of people. There's the kind of people that were just doing it because they thought that this was some sort of service and they didn't want to disappoint anybody, so they just kept it going. And when you actually step in and empower them as a leader to say, we don't have to keep doing this if you don't want to do it, then it's just like this huge rush of relief. And they've got more energy to invest in other areas. There are the other people that just, for whatever reason, they came to the Lord in this type of event, or they saw a big change several years ago and they just still really believe in it. That group is, they grieve it, and that's a valid thing to say and do, and we want to add validity to that. It is sticky, it's relational, it's hard to lead through. Another thing that I would say is, if you're listening and let's say you're not a church leader, and you're listening to this podcast because you want to better understand church leaders, which is kind of great. I would say this: if you're having conversations with your leadership and you kind of sense they're being nice about it, but they kind of want to end the program or the event that you're a part of, and you feel like they're the leaders, they need to make decisions and set courses. What I would encourage you to do is to humbly and prayerfully go along with what they're asking you to do. Here's why: because if you go ahead and sunset a ministry, if you go ahead and sunset an event or a program, it can be celebrated. It can be ended naturally in a way that feels right and appropriate. Otherwise, this approach where we have to end up just taking the oxygen out, like Sam says there, or what I call not prop it up anymore, that's just a slow, long death. And it doesn't do the it ends up in a lot of ways, and it's unfortunate, and it's unavoidable. But it ends up sort of discrediting all the great things it had. So celebrate it, and then maybe use the knowledge and the wisdom you learned from that program and event into a new one, or whatever the other ones that are in the church that would help with the mission and the ministry of the church.
You know what I've had the most difficulty killing?
Um, no, tell me.
Fundraisers.
That's interesting.
Fundraisers. And I am, and hear me out. If you are somebody who runs a fundraising program, listen, I'm sure yours is great. Like, I'm not philosophically opposed to fundraisers. But here's what I found in a lot of churches. Two or three of the churches that I've shepherded, they had West Bradenton when I first got here had several fundraising events for different ministries throughout the
I know
year.
what yeah, I get it. Yeah, yeah,
And it just sucked the life out of giving.
it
Because
does.
it
It
was
does.
like every 4 or 5 weeks, there was some event or some emphasis that wasn't even necessarily an event, where it was like, donate XYZ, or something like that. And I started looking at the numbers, and we it was like, well, how much did we raise from this? $750. And I'm like,
Hmm.
we did an all church effort that lasted like 3 weeks for $750 so the students could have a small discount on their
Right.
on their trip or whatever. I said,
Right.
this is such a waste. Now,
Hmm.
thankfully, we had a stewardship committee, you kind of walk them through it, and they were all like, "Oh, yeah, why are we doing it?" It was just because we've always done it. And frankly, moving away from those things at West Bradenton was relatively easy because people were kind of tired of doing it. They were just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, good. I don't have to do that anymore." It's like, no, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, I have
Hmm.
an extra weekend this year. And it's like, yes, yes, you do. You don't have to go
Hmm.
sell cookies door to door, to make
Yeah.
some money
Right.
for us. And it was, but I tell you, there were, it was a slow process because not every fundraiser was easy to do away with. There was a few
Mm.
that I'm just not going to talk about. It's very painful. Man, it was just so hard to get away from.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about these kinds of things, or why people feel like they add so much value. But in most cases, when you're just trying to get a discount for students to go on a mission trip, fundraising is not, it's not the way to go about it. When
Not
it comes
usually.
to giving in the church, it just ends up
Yeah.
being a lot of wasted effort for very little payoff. So that's
With
something that I've struggled to kill, just to
mm,
be very specific.
Yeah, and which brings me up to this other idea. And I've not always been the best at this, and I don't know any pastors that are. But when you've got so many things you've got going on, right? But it would be helpful, and I hope that I'm better at this in the future, to sit down with the people who are invested in these events and say, what is it that you really are passionate about? It's because I'm sure it's not baking. For most people, it's not like, I just really love baking dozens and dozens of cookies. It's just what gives me energy. It has to do with some other thing. And usually if you can do that, that's a really great shepherding moment, because then you can ask them, if that's what you're passionate about, what if we had a better way of fulfilling that goal? What if we could work together more to our strengths and modern interests and those sort of things, and work towards the same goal? We want to accomplish that, but at a better rate. At one church I was at, it was really hard for me. What I realized was there was this yearly offering. It's a denominational offering. It's named after a very prominent person, and we just weren't raising any money with it. None. And it fell during the holiday season, and so people were spending all their money other ways. And so I had this idea to just move it off of that holiday that is known for taking so much money and put it on a holiday that's still very, very religious. And we called it our Easter missions offering. We actually combined two of our offerings into one. We demonstratively could show. We raised way, way more money in that one offering than we did for decades in the two separate offerings. But it wasn't until I could show it that I could prove it to people. It's just in their minds, the math didn't work out. And we've always done it this way. And the denomination sends us all sort of materials for that sort of stuff. So sometimes it's just going to be something where you just got to like try it out. And I would even say that pastor and church leader, sometimes it's your program that needs to go. It's your event. It's your thing that needs to go. And you need to be just as open to killing that off as you are to the things that you don't culturally fit with.
I'm glad you said that because it popped in my head earlier. I was thinking, man, how many times have I consulted a church and it was more the staff or the lead pastor who had their pet programs and events and
Right.
less the church body? Boy, have I seen that a lot. A lot of times we
Mm.
put this blame on the members, and the members are the ones that are the victims because it's the staff and the pastors that are like, you got to do this, you got to be here. And they're like, all
Right.
right, because
Yeah.
they love their pastor, they'll be there. But so why are we doing this? So
Mm-hmm.
it's also a little bit of a self-examination for all of us who are pastors to say, do I have something that I
Mm-hmm.
want to do, and it's the church is doing it only because I want to do it? And
Yeah.
I've been guilty, and
Yeah.
I've seen others who are guilty as well.
I would just finish with this is my last thought. This is less a problem with your calendar and more a problem with your mission. The more clear you are as a church and as a leadership on what you are trying to do and how you're trying to do it, once everybody can get in line with that, a lot of these questions, a lot of these should we keep doing this, should we not, they become very clear. It's like, yeah, that doesn't fit the mission. Let's do something. Or that's not our vibe. At both of the churches I've pastored, the churches we developed a culture and ethos, and there were just certain things we don't do, and it was easy to say that's something that Summit Church does, or that's something that Woodland Heights does. That's kind of their shtick, and we want to support them and encourage them in that path. But that's really not something we do. And so, the clearer you become about your culture, your mission, your purpose, a lot of this stuff will settle itself. And I would encourage you to spend more time there initially than killing off things that you feel like are getting in the way of that. It may be the cart before the horse.
You know what I want to see churches bring back?
What's that? Oh, that's a great way to end this. What do you want to see come back?
Judgment House on Halloween.
Are you being serious right now? Or you really like those things?
Sort of. Like I know why it doesn't work and I know why it got canceled.
But they were
But
fun.
but you know
They were
what?
really
This
fun.
this idea of just like scaring the hell out of somebody, and I say that without cussing,
Literally,
like
literally,
you
yeah.
this like we are going to scare the hell out of you
That's
through
funny.
this judgment house. And I mean that quite literally in a soteriological way.
That's
Um,
funny.
and just the idea of like dressing up and just absolutely terrifying the neighborhood kids, it is somewhat
Mhm.
appealing to me. So, yeah,
Hmm.
I would like to see Judgment House come back. What do you want to see come back?
Man, I'm trying to think about it, and I don't want the church I pastor to be listening to this and going, "That's what we're going to do now," because I kind of think of it nostalgically. But I'll tell you what I kind of miss. When I was a kid, Vacation Bible School was not at all themey. There were no themes. It was just you went to crafts, and then you went and you ate, and we did the pledges, and then you did memory verses, and there were challenges, and it was all just pretty much like a fun school feel to it. And I learned a lot about the Bible and things like that. I like Vacation Bible School right now. The choreographed themed dances with the videos, and it's great. I have no problems with it at all. But nostalgically, I just sort of miss that little kind of small town feel to the way Vacation Bible Schools used to feel. So I
Let's
don't
make VBS great again, Josh. Let's make
know.
VBS great. I'm
And if
with you
that
there.
doesn't work, we'll run them through a judgment house.
Hey, here's a program you can start. This is
Yeah.
a upward. They sponsor the
Yeah.
show, but
Hmm.
we absolutely love what they do. And when we had this opportunity to bring them on as a sponsor, it was just an easy sort of thing to say yes, let's do this. We absolutely love how you are a bridge into the community. So thank you, Upward Sports, for uh, providing. What you do is you help us provide these shows for free to our audience, and that means a lot. But if you are looking to start something that can help you reach your community, there's not too many things that are better. Sports is a great bridge into the community. Upward does it better than anybody else. The world's largest Christian youth sports organization. They come alongside your church. They will help you advance your mission. They will do it in a way that's beneficial for your church. They run a good program. So I would encourage you to reach out to Upward. You can go to upward.org/church answers, upward.org/church answers, learn all about what they do. They've got a multitude of programs. You don't even need a gymnasium to do it. If you've got a field or a parking lot, they can help you. If you have access to a gymnasium, it doesn't even have to be at your church. This is a great way to get your people into the community. So thank you, Upward, for sponsoring the show. And all you listeners should reach out to them.
That's right. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you will think clearly about maybe sunsetting a few of the programs and the events in your church over the next years. I'm sure you would appreciate that in the long run. But thanks for listening. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, and share the show. We'll catch you next week.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org/church answers.